Hey everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll just wait a second to let other people join. Welcome to week 6, final week. Hopefully this one will be a little more fun than normal. Less of me talking and more hopefully of the group, and we'll be doing a fun 25 question quiz. So haven't done one of those since university myself, so should be fun. In this case, before we get started, this week in particular, like I said, I will be doing less talking. Well, it won't be a lecture like normal where we'll be going through the content. So if you're comfortable, feel free to go off video. I'd love to hear from the group a lot more today, hear your thoughts. To give everyone context as to, I guess, the series of things that we'll go through, we'll start and we'll just, for everyone who wants to participate, we'll do intros of people who are here, what you're working on, if you've gone through the book or if you've attended these sessions, if you've learned anything, if you also have any kind of like requests for the group, or you are running into problems like, oh, I really am struggling to monetize, I'd love to hear people's thoughts, you're welcome to use this forum as well for that. We'll get into that in a second. And then after that, we will do, as I said, a 25 question quiz. It's just for fun. So there's no marks or anything like that here, but it goes through every chapter of the book and some of the key takeaways, and kind of helps test your knowledge, see if you remember what you've learned throughout the sessions or throughout the book. And then finally, after that, I'll just leave it open for any questions if you have them about any of the content, about the quiz, about anything related to what we've talked about in the past several weeks. That's fair game. So before we jump into the quiz, would love to hear from some of you, especially since, I've been doing a lot of the talking in recent weeks. For anyone that's on right now and feels comfortable doing so, would love to hear who you are, what you're working on, if you've learned anything, what you've learned, and again, if you have any requests for the group, any questions for the group. We'll leave any questions from me in particular about the content to the end. But if anyone wants to start, I'll leave it open to the group. See Ritesh waving. Anyone want to start? Don't be shy.
I guess I could go. Oh, you waved first. Go ahead, Ritesh.
No, go ahead, Fanny. I'll go after you.
All right. So I'm Fanny. I'm a designer based in Montreal. I learned a whole bunch of stuff from this book. I attended a large part of the sessions, but I watched the playback of both the A and B sessions and noted down a bunch of questions. And so, this was a really great setup that you made for us to learn and actually apply the content. So thank you and good job. But so in terms of content, like in terms of my publication, I'm just starting. I recently launched a couple articles on my personal website, which is also my portfolio for design work. So there's I'm not sure how to promote the content without it being just related to my career in some ways, because I don't only talk about design. I have a hard time kind of defining my what for who. I talk for now about everything that interests me. And some of them are kind of big topics like society, like the meaning of life. I get philosophical a lot of times, but so I'm struggling about kind of the positioning, and I'm not sure how to distribute it, since it is like the same website where my portfolio work is. So those are kind of some issues I have, and I'm really not yet into like SEO stuff for now. I'm barely on social. I haven't leveraged my personal social networks for that, so I'm just getting to that step now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Fanny. And just a thought there, from my personal experience with kind of defining your who, it can be difficult, especially if you are someone who wants to write about a bunch of different topics. And sometimes, at least for me, my who was basically as vague as it sounds, someone like me. So for me, it was kind of like this techie digital nomad who happens to be on the road. So for you, it might be like a designer like you who is maybe not just interested in design, but all of these other things. And if you can identify that there's probably like a decent number of people who are in that vein, then that's okay. It doesn't need to be so rigid and be like, I only write about design. But as long as you can kind of identify that there's other people within that group or who have a similar nature to yourself, then that's okay for that being your who. Cool. Anyone else want to go?
Hey everyone. Hey Steph.
Hey.
I'm Ritesh. I'm writing I started this whole thing during COVID, so I decided to just write about stuff. I didn't know what I wanted to write about, but I started writing about my life, and I was kind of so the subjects were like very vague. I didn't have any clue what I wanted to write about. But somewhere down the line, in the last month or so, I decided to focus down on a single subject called play. Right. So I'm trying to figure out how, as adults, we can bring the spirit of play into our lives. Right. So, and that's kind of like a narrow focus in sense of a genre. Like, I mean, that's like a niche subject, but nonetheless, the kind of topics I write about is still, pretty vague. And I'm still trying to figure out where exactly to blog in terms of technology, putting up a website, a newsletter. So as of now, I'm writing daily on Substack, and I have a little blog which is just a bunch of, say, 5, 6 articles so far. And after going through all of the stuff that you've put out this far, I figured out I need to start up a proper blog and put my blog and my newsletter on the same domain, right, for SEO reasons. And I'm also deciding to start a little digital garden as a subdomain of the main domain, right? So the digital garden won't give me pretty URLs. So in the sense, I don't have URLs with the titles. So it's going to be like some sort of hash, code. So, but nonetheless, I think that's easy for me to just spit off articles once in a while, and I'll keep that as a subdomain. And so I'm also going to have, so as at this point of time, this is what I have in mind. So I got a subject in mind. I got like a certain kind of structure where I have a website, a blog, and a digital garden all hosted on the same domain. So that's where I'm going at from now.
That's super cool. And yeah, I definitely like the idea of having multiple, like if you are kind of creating different products, it sounds like, right? You have your main blog and then you have your digital garden. Using subdomains is huge. And there used to be a lot of kind of like pushback in the past of like, do subdomains, are they worse for SEO and all this stuff? And it's kind of been disproven. So if anyone is like thinking of doing something similar, of having like different types of things, similar to how I have my blog on a subdomain and then other stuff on the main domain, definitely would encourage it. And the juice, or I guess like the SEO juice, all goes to the same main domain in the end. So you don't lose anything there. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to go?
Thank you.
I can. Hey, Steph. Thank you, first of all, for the course. It was very interesting. I've learned a lot. Just a quick background about me is I've done a lot of courses and YouTube videos. And one thing I realized after a bunch of people buying these courses is 95% of them never open it. And that's not really something I was excited about, because I really wanted to impart some what I've learned the last 20 years. So that's why I made a pivot to, okay, it needs to be concise and insightful. So that's why I'm starting this newsletter with 3 to 5 minute reads. That's all it is, once a week. So I've gotten better. Found a writer, and we've going through the articles and getting that ready. I haven't made a lot of progress on the distribution side because I was in Substack based on a conversation, moved to Ghost using Droplet. I can't get it to work, but I just put it on the site. But during the process, what I've learned is similar to what you're saying is I'm looking for entrepreneurs similar to me who have identified or who have realized now that timing is greater than idea. What I mean by that is it could be a crappy idea, but the timing is right, will work. So my whole concept is bringing trends around the world that is the appropriate timing for you to jump on. So entrepreneurs who are already founders or who want to be can leverage this and get their brain thinking. So that's really where I am. And it's been a fun journey. So I'm going to try to get on SEO and Twitter, all that stuff. But first, I want to get a good writer to get this all going. So that's what I am. But thank you for everything you've done so far.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And by the way, I had Andrew message me, and he was struggling with setting up Ghost as well. And he managed to kind of get it to work after just trying again. I'm not sure what the particular step was that was not working in the first place, but if you are running into problems with Ghost, you can message me and I can try to help you set up that droplet. It should be pretty straightforward. But yeah, if you're running into issues, just let me know.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. opening the floor to anyone else that wants to
Yeah,
share.
I'll jump in really quick. And yeah, if there was, for me, like on that ghost thing really quick, it really, I didn't do anything different. I just deleted it and started over, and whatever was going wrong or whatever step I was missing, it was fine the second time through. So it went pretty quickly. But I'm Andrew Ray. I work in tech and venture capital. Hoping to kind of do build a really just looking to build my personal brand. I'm not trying to build a publication or anything like that, but more for the sake of just investment opportunities, meeting interesting people online, and honestly, eventually, like if I hope to start a company again someday, stuff like that. So building that brand, building that audience, that distribution is kind of just what I'm after, but more on like the personal side of it. So haven't been doing it off and on for like a year or so now. So hoping to get a little more consistent and a little more targeted with like the audience and what I write about and stuff like that. So thanks everyone, and I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Andrew. And yeah, one quick note on the ghost thing. The one step that I know that I've seen multiple people miss is the Cloudflare settings, the SSL settings from flexible to full. That can mess things up. So if you play around with that, that might be the issue. Cool. Anyone else?
I can go.
Sweet.
If that's okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm a marketing writer. And then like in my free time, I am a copywriter. So Steph, thank you so much for your book. It's been so helpful. And you guys are not speaking English to me right now because I haven't made it to those parts of the book, because similar to Fanny, I am still focused on how it can help me with 3 different things. So it's just my own website, it's a news aggregate and political newsletter that I'm working on, and recently we've pivoted to kind of more of a city guide that also has more of like a newsletter component. So it's been super, it's been super helpful. And then to similar to Fanny as well, find myself like kind of, stuck in the stages of like in my personal site, how it is a site for work and how it is also a site for content, and kind of figuring in and honing in on really what you should be putting out there and making sure that it's very high quality. So still working through that and also like fielding in the work that is coming through the work portion of the site. So the actual clients and copywriting like that. So haven't had that much of a chance to focus on it. But anyways, everything has been so helpful, so insightful, so excited to crack into like the SEO parts of the book as well. And nice to meet everyone here today.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'll just quickly note for both you and Fanny and whoever else is potentially doing a site with like corporate or like business stuff, that in addition to writing, something to keep in mind is that sometimes because we see everything, we think like the person visiting our site sees everything, but the person on your site only ever sees the first page that they get to, and then they may browse more, right? But like if you happen, for example, write a bunch of articles and they rank on SEO or on Google because of SEO, then like that person's only seeing that article, right? They're not seeing that like, oh, you also do all these other things. Now that can be a good or bad thing. So you can kind of almost structure your site to show people as much of what you want to show them, if that makes sense, right? So you can have it really, really prominent in your nav bar, a portfolio button if you want that, or it can be pretty subtle, right, within your design. And so you can decide how much people actually coming to your site for a particular purpose see the other purposes of your site, for example. So I have like a big green button that says blog on just stephsmith.io because I want people to see that, but I could remove that and then anyone hitting stephsmith.io would never see any of my articles, if that makes sense. Cool. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, I'll go. Hey, Steph. Hey, everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm a physician by trade who left medicine to found a cannabis company. Now, that's not doing so well for all sorts of reasons, as is the industry. So I was actually looking for Steph's content to do my own personal project, particularly of psychedelics and the mental health aspects of it, along with the legal, the science, and medicine. But part of the problems of the cannabis industry is because it's so fragmented in the industry, a lot of the info it ends up being sourced by black market and so forth. Going forward, people aren't really trusting it, and there's a ton of stigma. Now, that said, I had the pleasure of meeting Steph in person at a Trends meetup, and I honestly saw, like, within a few minutes, like, how smart she was and how experienced, and she knew SEO and everything. So thank you, Steph, for putting this all together, spoon feeding us with lectures and giving us the kind of all-in-one everything textbook. Because there's nothing I appreciate more of all the courses, all the info, than the kind of the human aspect of it, of someone that you know who you can trust and who has put it to work and kind of dumping it all for you so that you can do it too. So I definitely appreciate that, and I'm very grateful, very thankful, and hoping to use that for my psychedelics website, content website, hybrid newsletter going forward.
Thanks, Andrew. And by the way, I think something that we talked about throughout the first chapter is this like what for who statement. And I think that's a really potentially interesting angle where like everyone's writing about psychedelics, everyone's writing about cannabis, like, but as you said, it comes from a specific kind of source most of the time and written in a specific kind of way. And if you're able to layer on something that isn't really being done, which is from this like academic or clinical standpoint, I think that could actually be really interesting.
Yep.
Cool.
You bet. From what I've seen so far, not too much is written about psychedelics. I've been on some lectures. I asked them, where do you get your source from? It's either an academic researcher who's reading primary journals, which no one's going to do, that maybe I can diffuse and summarize for people, or they just get it, or they actually have no idea. The lawyers only know they're legal. Regulators don't even know what they're doing. So if we can start now, all the SEO is very low difficulty versus cannabis right now. It's super high difficulty and impossible to rank for anything, even with the absolute best articles.
Yeah, and something to keep note of is Google is more stringent with, you know how there's credibility, relevance, usability.
Mm-hmm.
Credibility is more important for particular subjects, anything like
You bet.
medicine, and which basically like how much does it matter if this information is correct or not? Google keeps that in mind, right? Because obviously if Google is producing or surfacing bad medical information, that's much worse than if they happen to be surfacing like not the best iPhone case, right? And so that's really important to keep in mind for medicine. And if you are able to build up a good domain authority, then that's crucial for if you are planning to rank for specific like terms related to cannabis or psychedelics and things like that, especially from the clinical standpoint.
You bet. Thank you.
Sure. I'll leave it open. Any other takers?
Hi, I'm Jeanette. Sorry, my video isn't working today. Yeah, just want to say thank you so much, Steph, for your book. I really enjoyed it and really tore through it on the first weekend. And I really appreciate all the slides. I have a newsletter that just crossed 1,000 subscribers. And last week, I just launched my blog on ghosts. So thanks, Steph, for that article. It really helped me set up everything on DigitalOcean myself. Yeah, and right now, I think some of you have already purchased it. I built a newsletter resource for newsletter creators that's launching tomorrow. So I'm really excited to share that with others as well.
Awesome. What's it called?
It's called Newsletter Operating System. Yeah.
Cool. And if people are interested, where can they find that to know?
I will drop a link, but it's at newsletteros.com. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, congrats. Yeah. And yeah, thanks so much. You've been a really avid supporter of the book. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Monique, I saw you go off mute before. So feel free to go ahead.
Hello everyone. So I'm Monique. I just graduated college a year ago. And I'm freelancing in marketing, and I also launched a side project to help foreign students in Paris, where I live. But with COVID, it's a little bit it's a little bit hard right now. So I really enjoyed the book, and I'm really interested in building my personal brand, because as I've been doing freelancing, I realized that to really differentiate yourself, it's very important to have your own brand and not just be another marketing freelancers, because there's like thousands of them. So that's why I'm here and willing to connect with all of you.
Thanks so much, Monique. Anyone else?
Steph, Dean here. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. So, Steph, look, like everyone else has said, I really appreciated the book. It's been really helpful. Background, I've been someone who's been employed for too many decades. So I'm a corporate guy trying to break out of the mold. I've been working on a business idea, which is an app for children. It has 3 main areas around physical activity, mindfulness, and healthy eating, cooking. In that, I want to have a resource centre that a bit like Andrew and with his medical background, actually ties together some of this to research, etc. But as I was thinking through that, your book came out, and I think, well, actually, if I start doing some of these articles, which I need for the resource centre anyway, I can use that to start a newsletter, try and develop at least some customer base as a mailing list. That may help, and this goes back to some of the stuff that Sam Parr and the team do, and I went through the ideation course that Sam put on as well, and try and get to those group of ideal customers so that I can get some feedback and even use them to help with the launch of the other. And the articles themselves help build some credibility, build an audience before trying to launch the other. So that's sort of what I'm aiming for. I've done the research on Ghost. Other people got stuck with the connections between Ghost and the Droplet. I haven't got that far. So how do you go less than 0? But I've been on the Ghost site and I need to set those things up. And I've started sketching out how some of the articles come together. And I think that with what I'm trying to do, it does actually form a bit of a pyramid. There's the 3 parts I mentioned, and there's some joiner pieces at the top. And in terms of the market, obviously we're looking at parents as one part, but there's the kids themselves. The articles are not really designed for the kids, but the app is. So how do you make the app really appeal to the kids? But the articles is for really the parents. And it's not so much about replacing team sports, it's more around the nerds, as Sam would put it, So the people who may be big studiers, and how can they actually get some activity and be more focused, or even create a bit of a community, and particularly in times of COVID. So that's kind of a bit of what it's about. So I'm getting some thoughts around it. The book has been fantastic to give me some real shape. So I want to say thank you. And being part of these sessions, it's the first time I've shared the video, because normally there's so much activity happening in the evenings here at home. So, but it's been great. So thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing. I know we're 25 minutes in. If anyone wants to share, I want to give everyone the opportunity, but I also want to make sure that we dive into some of the other stuff before people have to drop. Anyone else want to go before we switch over?
Yeah, I'll quickly say hi. I'm Jake.
Jake.
Hi. I write about computer graphics and create videos, and the book's been really good for me. I'm going to push forward with better SEO, hopefully now, and just get this right and have it on the go.
Sweet. Thanks, Jake. I know Jake from Bali. So thanks for reading the book, Jake, and being a supporter. Anyone else? All right. Well, I have one quick request before we go into the polls, because I know probably throughout that people might have to drop. I want to, if people are cool with it, if you're not, you're free to turn off your video. I want to take a quick screenshot picture of the group, because this is our last session. So if you want to smile, I have resting sad face. So, do your best to smile, because I will be taking a photo. All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll be tweeting that if people are cool with it. If not, message me now so I blur out your face. Anyway, all right. Anyone else before we want to jump into the 25 question poll? All right. Doesn't sound like it. So I'm going to share my screen. I know I said there's no slides, but I promise they're just for the poll. No more lecture. Extra is chapter 6. I'm going to skip by this and just go into, let's see what you remember. So actually, quick overview. We went through all this. We're not going to go through it in depth now, but we're going to test your knowledge from what you learned from there. So I'm going to see if I can get this to work, because I'm going to have the slides up, but also be doing the polls from Zoom. So let's see. Launch poll. Can you guys see it? Can someone give me a yes or a thumbs up or something? See that you can see the Zoom poll in addition to the what's on your screen.
Yes.
All right, cool. Perfect. So I'll read out the questions. You should see some sort of Zoom widget where you can actually vote just for fun. And again, this is not being scored or anything like that. So this is just for fun. So question number 1 from the first chapter is, 366 billion domains were registered in ... the past decade, the last 5 years, 2020 year to date, or Q1 2020. Take a couple seconds to put in your responses. All right, looks like we've got the critical mass. I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results. People guessed mostly the last 5 years. The answer in this case is actually Q1 2020. So this is a quick reminder that there is so much information online. We talked already from people in this group, how many people are setting up a new Droplet or putting their content online. They're just starting their publication. So 300 domain names were registered in Q1 2020, and before that, there are billions that already exist out there in terms of websites. So remember, information is this new oil that you can create, refine, trade, and we're in this attention economy where everyone is fighting for the attention of many. This is a quick reminder of this idea that the ease of entry is really what has enabled this huge difference or disproportionate nature of the supply of content. All right, question number 2. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna figure out how to share question number 2. All right, launch poll. Question number 2 is, with respect to content, how should we interpret saturation? Is it the presence of this doesn't grammatically make sense. Is it the presence of existing players? Is it the existing size of those players? Is it the likelihood that you can out-innovate existing players, or the lack of existing players in that particular space? So again, you should see that Zoom thing pop up. One quick question, when you guys are voting, can you see the votes already or no? You cannot, okay.
No, not until you show the results.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm gonna end the poll, show the results. So people, you guys got it right, or at least 9 of you did. It is a likelihood that you can out-innovate the existing players. So remember this concept that many people misinterpret saturation. It's not the sheer number of people in a space, but the likelihood that you can out-innovate. So in fact, sometimes it's actually better. I'm just refreshing you guys on this slide that certain spaces that seem really competitive may actually be better than spaces where no one exists, because if no one exists, that means that maybe it's not a problem people care about. And in addition to seeing just sheerly how many people are in a space, you need to identify how well are these people addressing a current problem. If they're addressing it well, and there's only even, or if they're addressing it well and there's even just a few competitors, that's actually worse than if there's many people, but they're not actually addressing that problem well. So again, it's the likelihood that you can out-innovate existing players. All right, question 3 is live. Okay, it is, the internet has reshaped which, I say content mechanics as a pun on quantum mechanics. So what content mechanics have been reshaped? Is it the ability to put content online? Is it the ability to distribute to larger audiences? The ability to distribute to more niche audiences, or all of the above? Just wait a couple more seconds to get all the votes in. Okay, so everyone got this one right. This one was an easy one, but yes, it is the idea that it is not just the fact that it's easier to put content online, but we have completely different distribution mechanics that we have available to us. So today you can stand out by creating great content and differentiating there, but also know that you can differentiate by your ability to distribute content better than existing players. And remember, attention is not returned linearly. So your investment in either of those areas, if you do better than what exists out there right now, oops, I forgot to share the results. There you go. That will give you disproportionate returns. All right. Question number 4, launched. What products succeed in 2020, or really in this era that we're in, given the things that we've talked about? So A, is it products that have no competition? B, products that are pretty good at everything? C, products that are the best at one thing that people care about? Or D, products that have been around the longest. I'm making some of these questions a little too easy, it seems like, because everyone's getting this one right as well. But I think it's still helpful to remind you guys of some of these things. All right, here we go. Share the results. Everyone got that one right. It is C, products that are the best at one thing that people care about. The example that I consistently give is this Costco example. Costco does something very specific. They beat retailers in one thing, which is price. This is a quick reminder of all the things that Costco does not do or focus on very much, but it focuses on price better than any other competitors in their space. Question number 5. You want to find a niche, but niche can mean a couple different things or be viewed a couple different ways. You are looking at least with content, to identify your ... niche topic, niche positioning, niche industry, or niche audience. This one's divided, which is always fun, interesting to see. All right, so this one was divided, and actually most people got it wrong. So I can understand why you got it wrong based on some of the things that I've taught you, but at least in terms of finding a niche, you want to find your niche positioning, right? So you may happen to target a niche audience, but for example, in the case of Costco, although that's not content, they're not targeting a niche audience. They're targeting a huge audience, right? Of general people who engage with general retail. The same thing is true. Sometimes you might target a niche topic like microchips, but sometimes you may target a topic like, you know, tech overall, like The Hustle does. Business and tech, that is not a niche topic. Similarly, you don't necessarily need to target a niche industry, but no matter what you do, when you're identifying your niche, you need niche positioning, which is the same idea that the kind of Costco example leveraged, which is this idea that you can target a specific, very specific small group of people, but there is no need to. And sometimes that's actually the wrong way to go, because if there's not many people who care about a particular topic, then it's going to be hard for you to really grow to significant size. So remember, niche is targeted, but it's not necessarily small. And you can target a large industry audience or topic set. You don't have to, but you can. But regardless of whatever you do, you need some sort of niche positioning in that scope. All right. Question number 6 is launched, and it is, people tend to focus too much on their blank instead of their blank. And there's a couple options here: when, what, how, who, what, who, and who, when. All right, so I'm gonna end this poll. So again, I can see why the answers on this one were actually incorrect, but in this case, the answer is B. People focus too much on their what. So for example, what they're writing about, microchips, tech, whatever it is, instead of their how. And what I mean by how, and I can see probably the people who chose who were thinking along the same lines of this, but it's this idea where when people talk about their favorite things, this is similar to the differentiator concept, they talk about how that thing is different, right? So they talk about how it's shorter, how it's more contrarian, how it really makes them laugh. So when you're focusing on your publication, sure, you need to identify what you're writing about and be consistent. There's many other things that you need to keep in mind, but what you really need to keep in mind that people often forget is how you're different, and how you're actually facilitating your differentiator over time. So there's this line that says, people, more often than not, people, this is, I wrote these slides at like 2 a.m., but it's basically supposed to say when people talk about their favorite thing, right, whether it's a newsletter or store or whatever, they do so not because it covers a specific what, but how it actually covers that what. All right, so question 7 is, on to the next chapter, which is building your home. So just a couple quick questions here. The first one I didn't actually cover, so I'm interested to see what people think. But to set up your home, we talked about you need a couple different things. You'll need a domain, hosting, so servers, a blogging platform, an email service provider, and some form of analytics. Which of these is actually the hardest to migrate from, to, or from? And I actually have Moto software here. This should be analytics, but doesn't matter. The same thing is true. The answer will be the same regardless, which I guess gives you a hint. Give it a couple more seconds for people to get their votes in. All right, so most of you got this right. It is your blogging platform. So I won't go into this in too much detail. If anyone has any questions about this, happy to answer them. But the idea here is that switching your domain, that one's not super straightforward, but it does not take that much effort. Switching your servers, also pretty easy to do. Switching your email service provider, a little more uplift, but for example, switching your email service provider, there are certain things where like your sender score may go down and other things you have to worry about. But in general, it's just about exporting your CSV of newsletters, subscribers, and just porting them over. Analytics, you're just installing another pixel. Your blogging platform, on the other hand, that hosts all of your content, and migrating that over to another site on its own is a lot because the syntax of a particular platform may not match. Plus, you're migrating over all that information. But in addition to that, you have to figure out your redirects. There's tons of different things that you have to factor in if you're switching your blogging platform. And you may be wondering, why am I showing you guys this particular one? Well, I realized I was reading through the book to figure out what questions I should include in this. And I realized that in general, I say, don't worry about your tech, just choose something, you can switch. Well, the one thing that I think you should actually kind of invest in the sense of like figure out what is best for you at the beginning is your blogging platform, because that one does have the most friction and the most headache if you do want to switch it sometime in the future, versus if you choose a domain and you want to switch it later, that's pretty straightforward. Even an email service provider, if you start with MailChimp and want to go to ConvertKit, no worries. But really the blogging platform is something that you should try to figure out early on. All right. Question number 8 is live. All right, so readers tend to be more blank with paid content, but are rarely that same blank with free content. Okay, looks like most of the votes are in. This one's pretty tied across the board, but the most people got it right of any of the entries, and it is monogamous. And it's this concept where, in general, actually, people will find reasons to be engaged, critical, or satisfied with paid or free content. Just because you put a paywall around it does not mean that people will necessarily be more engaged. It also doesn't necessarily mean that people will be more critical. People can also be very critical of free content. The same thing in reverse can be true in terms of satisfaction. But there is something that it tends to be true across the board, which is that people are more monogamous with their paid content and less so with their free content. All that means is that because you're putting stuff behind a paywall, people aren't going to, subscribe to 10 different paid newsletters about, how to become a better creator. They will potentially subscribe to 10 free newsletters about that. But of course, there's like everyone has a budget, and not just a sheer budget, but a budget that they feel comfortable spending on a particular type of thing in their life. And in general, paid content is not something that people, freely want to spend hundreds of dollars a month on. And so for that reason, it's really important to keep in mind that readers tend to be more monogamous with their paid content versus their free content. And what does that impact for you? Well, it just means that if you are in a very competitive space where there's already a lot of free content out there, you may end up wanting to launch a free newsletter versus a paid newsletter because your paid newsletter may not be able to stand out amongst the sea of stuff that already exists out there. So remember, if there are 5 people adding value to X space, like let's say personal development, well, if you find a really great personal development newsletter out there, you'll probably subscribe to it if it's free. However, if you have a wealth of content available to you in that particular space, and you run into something that's paid, you're less likely to incorporate it, and you're certainly less likely to incorporate it if you're already subscribed to a paid version of something similar. Okay. Question number 9 is live, and it is, which one of these is typically not a reason that someone buys a paid content subscription? A, they want to win back their time, they don't have enough content, they want higher quality information, they want to fund a specific type of journalism, or they want to fund or support a specific type of creator or individual. Okay, looks like most of you got it right. It is B, they don't have enough content. So again, this is why they do, what is the reason that they don't buy a paid subscription? So this is a common theme throughout some of these questions, but there's a lot of content out there. People aren't buying a paid subscription because they don't have enough of it. So remember, we talked about how if you create any sort of paid subscription, and you have some free version of it, you need to delineate the two because people have enough content. And if you're just offering more content, that's not really going to serve you as well as if you're differentiating. Reasons that people do actually subscribe to paid newsletters include, as you can see here, this is one of the old slides from lecture 2. Yeah, if they will happily subscribe if they win back some tangible form of their time, if there's higher quality, more actionable, if there's something differentiated about the information. Some will do it for a certain type of journalism. They want to support writers, for example, or paid content in China is much more prevalent because people want kind of like anti-establishment content. And finally, we see many examples out there of people wanting to just support a creator. I know people, myself, who, you know, they don't even engage that much with the paid content that they're buying from certain creators, but they just love what that creator stands for, what they believe in, or what they're working towards, and are happy to support. Okay, question 10 is live. If you gate your content, what is the most important thing that you should consider? And when I say most here, of course, there's nuance, but there is one point that I'm trying to get across with this question. So is it A, how much you're planning to charge, how consistently you will publish, what your distribution vectors are, or what your customer LTV is? All right, I'll give it another couple seconds for people to enter their answers, but it looks like most people have voted, and the majority, 5 people, got it right. It is C, what your distribution vectors are. So again, there's some nuance to this, and some people might say, oh, is that the most important always? Well, maybe not always, but the idea here is that if you're getting your content, we'll get to things like pricing in the monetization questions, but the idea is that there are many publications that don't necessarily publish consistently. There are many publications that at the beginning don't know their customer LTV, or there are publications that switch their pricing over time, right? So those things matter. I'm not saying they don't matter, but the really key thing if you plan to get your content, which I'm really trying to drill in because it's, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is people set up, you know, Substacks, for example, these days, is that if you gate your content, you lose most of your distribution vectors. And this is really important because the value that you're creating with your content is behind a paywall, and it becomes infinitely harder for you to grow, or I should say maybe not infinitely, but exponentially harder for you to grow, and therefore harder to scale. And so one thing to just really keep in mind here is that you see many success stories of people on Substack. I'm not saying it can't happen for someone without an audience, but most of those people came with their audiences. They came with their following, and then they converted some of that following. So remember, if you go and create any sort of paid publication, you need to have some sort of idea of how you're going to grow. And we discussed two different options where you can either gate some of your content, but remember what I said. And the last question is that ideally that's differentiated from your non-paid content, or you can start free, build up your audience, and then convert at a later date, in which case, based on people who have done this, it's somewhere between 3 to 10% of people who read your stuff for free end up converting to paid. So that's just really important to keep in mind. Okay, question number 11. This one should be an easy one, I think, but good distribution is ... Additive, a multiplier, optional, or easy. It looks like it was an easy one based on the responses coming in. All right, I'll let this one end quickly because everyone got it right. But it is, or most people got it right, but it's a multiplier. And for the person who said additive, it's basically the same thing. But the reason that that I specifically included additive and clarified that it's a multiplier is that distribution, at least in terms of how I view it and my experience with it, it's kind of like if you've ever heard of Derek Sivers' ideas versus execution thing, where ideas are worth a certain amount, but not that much, but really execution is this amazing multiplier for anything that you do. Well, I think the same thing is true actually for distribution, where if you're creating good content, I have this matrix here where if you have low quality or high quality, let's say low quality is worth 1, high quality is worth 10, well, bad distribution is worth 1. It goes nowhere. And you're multiplying these two, right, in a 2x2 matrix. Good distribution is this incredible multiplier that is underutilized by so many creators. And so just imagine where if you're focused just on high quality, but you have bad distribution, you're at a 10. Even if you have like a decent article, but you're really good at distributing it, you're at a 50. This is arbitrary, but you get my point, where if you join the two together, that's when you really start to get this multiplication to this 500 number, which again is arbitrary, but it's this idea where distribution can take you so far, and it is so underutilized for the bulk of creators who focus on this idea where it's like, I need to create great content, and that is true, but distribution is the equal, if not more important part of that equation. All right, so I'm gonna stop this share and then go on to question 12. So we're around halfway through. Question 12, when you were just starting out your job, when I say you're just starting out your publication, your job is to do things that don't blank. Cost very much. B is require much bandwidth. C, scale. Or D, have much competition. All right, most people have voted, so I'm going to end the poll. Most people got this one right. It is when you are just starting out, your job as a creator is to do things that don't scale. So some people answered require much bandwidth or have much competition. Remember, for having competition can be a good thing. And most of the time, you should not be focused on trying to identify spots that have no competition. And also keep in mind that, as I've mentioned throughout these sessions, it's difficult to do content over time, and it will require a lot of bandwidth, and that bandwidth is, if anything, more intensive at the beginning, and you learn to create more effectively later on. So actually at first you really shouldn't be focused on this concept of doing things that don't require much bandwidth. What you should be doing is focusing on things that don't scale. So remember I said with the example of newsletters, subscribers, when you're at 30 subscribers, your goal is not to get to 1,000, it's to get to 31. And there are certain things that you'll do. To give a couple example reminders, things like Morning Brew, going to their business school and just handing around a clipboard and then uploading those emails to their system later. That's something that doesn't scale, but that got them close to their 100, true fans, as we say. So remember at the beginning, don't focus so much on, how do I get to 1,000 subscribers? How do I get to 10,000 subscribers? How do I do these things that are infinitely scalable? Those things will come later. We talked about different channels and how certain channels help you at the beginning, but maybe aren't so scalable later. And then you kind of pivot or transition to more scalable things in the future. But remember at the beginning, just focus on how do I get the next subscriber? How do I get the next article out? Because another thing to keep in mind is if you focus on this, these purely scalable things, it can be overwhelming. So instead, just focus on what you can control and what you can make happen at the beginning. Okay, question number 13 is, what is typically the most underutilized channel type? So channel type here for creators. So we talked about these 6 channel types in the course, and this is an opinion, so that should be, said before I give the answer to this. But of the different channel types, Bedrock, Viral, Social, Syndicate, Targeted, and Paid, which one tends to be the one that has the highest potential for impact, but the one that I see at least creators leveraging the least? All right, looks like everyone got it, which is good news for me because this is one of the most important, I think, takeaways from the book, and it's Bedrock. Again, a lot of creators, they invest in things like viral networks or social networks, and that's great, especially potentially if you are at the beginning and you're trying to get people in and get attention. But if you're really looking to create something scalable in the future and to really have this dependable nature to your traffic where you're building up a foundation, then Bedrock is essential. It's not something that's nice to have, it truly is essential. And without it, you're never going to be able to build up a publication that is sustainable, that's reaching anything more than, a couple hundred page views a day. So yes, Bedrock, most important. And this is a quick reminder of the different types of channels. So Bedrock includes things like Google, organic traffic, your newsletter, Quora Answers is another example. And then, I'm not going to go through the rest of these, but you can revisit the book at any point if you want to remember the different types of channels here. Okay, question 14. Oh, actually, before we go into question 14, quick note, this is just a reminder of why Bedrock is so important. If you're trying to get to something like 30,000 page views a day, the only real way to do that is without blowing a bunch of money or kind of resting on luck is through organic traffic. So quick reminder on that. And a secondary reminder here is that if you were to guess which one of these sites that I showed in the book and in the live sessions has the most organic traffic, has the highest proportion of organic traffic, you can normally guess based on the stability of the actual traffic, which is, in this case, Neil Patel's site relative to the others on this page. Again, not hating on any of the other sites here, they're all amazing, but that's one way to think about it, is you can really get this dependable traffic. All right, now we can actually do question 14, which is, when you're optimizing your conversion modals, so remember those are the modals on your site to get people to subscribe to your newsletter, which one of these is not a suggestion? So I gave a couple suggestions for things that you can consider doing to increase your conversion rate. What is one that is not a suggestion? So is it aligning the copy to match the value you're providing, removing distractions, calming concerns, minimizing the length of the copy, or using social proof? Give it a couple more seconds because people seem a little stuck on this one. Not everyone's voted yet. Okay, we'll end the poll. So the answer is minimizing the length of the copy. So again, this is what I did not say is a suggestion, not what is a suggestion. So all of these others are actually suggestions of things that you should do. Minimizing the length of the copy does not matter, at least in the sense that you are not trying to minimize it. So you certainly do not want pages and pages of or paragraphs and paragraphs of text on your bounce modal, for example, but you're not necessarily trying to minimize the copy there. And here is just a quick reminder of some of the things that are on here. So you do want value alignment. So remember, no one wants to, start now or get another email in their inbox or subscribe. They want to get smarter. They want new case studies. They want to be a better marketer. So making sure that the value that you're providing is reflected in the copy. And you're not just using some vague marketing terms. You definitely do want to, so this, I don't have an image for it, but remove distractions, which means that if you're really trying to get someone to subscribe to something, you don't want 6 different CTAs on the page that bring them to different places. So if you are trying to get someone to subscribe to your newsletter, then make sure that's the main CTA on the page. You want to calm concerns, so you can see examples on this slide of people who remind them that they care about privacy, or that the newsletter is super short, or that they will never spam them. So those are a couple ways that you can calm concerns. And then finally, you want to use social proof. This one's pretty straightforward. Anything from logos to using the number of people that are subscribing, things like that. So the one thing that is not necessarily a suggestion here is minimizing the length of the copy. You can see there's many different examples and modals here with differing lengths of copy. All right. Question 15 is, which channel is a quote unquote no-brainer in particular because it tends to drive high value subscribers? Is it A, giveaways, B, social media, C, referral programs, D, Google Discover, E, paid ads, F, influencers, or G, Hacker News? All right, looks like actually most people got this right. I wasn't sure. It's always funny creating questions like this because you never know which ones are hard or difficult, or some of them everyone gets right. This one most people did. It's their full program, and I would say whoever answered giveaways, you're pretty close there in the sense that typically those two are paired together. Want to just remind people that the reason that the answer is referral program is, anyone who's currently subscribed to your newsletter, ideally, especially in the beginning, is the closest thing you have to your, true fans, right? They're subscribed already, they're hopefully engaged in your content, especially if they happen to be referring someone else. And they know most likely people who are just like them who, again, if they're high value and they happen to be referring someone, they probably know other people who are high value subscribers. So you tend to see in general for newsletters that referral programs across the different spectrum of things that you can use for distribution bring in the highest quality subscribers, because there is that personal touch, and if people actually almost like pre-vetting people for you in the people that they're referring. As I said, you can pair in giveaways where, for example, you can launch a giveaway and you can just within your list say anyone who signs up today, and you can drive paid ads to it, gets access to this giveaway. But an even better version of that is where you integrate it with the referral program, where you get an entry into the giveaway by referring people. So if you just purely do a giveaway that's unrelated to any sort of referring, you tend to get really low quality subscribers in because everyone just wants the results or the prize from that giveaway. But if you pair it with a referral program and the need to refer people, that elevates the quality. So you can pair these two together, but in general, a referral program tends to be a no-brainer, especially once you're at scale, because you basically have this engine of people who are helping you grow, and they're helping you find, in particular, high-value subscribers just like them. Okay. Question 16 is, what is the key reason that you shouldn't use Medium as your primary platform for publication? So again, there's many reasons, some of them on here, but what's the key one? Is it that Medium gates the articles? Is it that Medium no longer has the scale that it once did? Is it that you don't control your following? Is it that most big publications that were once on Medium have now moved off? Or is it that Medium makes money off your content and that is not cool? All right, so this is one that everyone got right. It is that you don't control your following. So I won't go into it too deeply here, but yes, exactly. You don't control your following. Doesn't matter if Medium's making money off your stuff or if, you know, Medium needs to be bigger, all this stuff. Medium still has lots of scale and, you know, there is potential to get traffic from Medium, but you want to use Medium as a distribution channel, not as your home, because you want to control your following. You don't have access to your subscribers if you start your publication on Medium and want to move off at some other point. So create your own publication, whether it's on WordPress or Ghost or whatever you're doing, and then republish your stuff on Medium later. All right, question 17, launch poll. All right, so what is not true about publishing on Reddit? A, Reddit is massive. B, Reddit's audience is super critical. C, Reddit is only for technical topics. D, Redditors prefer to stay on the platform. E, Reddit is still a community. And F, Reddit allows you to get specific. So which one of these is not true about Reddit? All right, well, looks like some people had to drop, so most of the votes are in now, and most people got this one right as well. It is that, again, this is what's not true, is that Reddit is only for technical topics. If you go to subredditstats.com, for example, and you look at the subreddits that are on there, there's subreddits for literally everything. Yes, there are many technical subreddits, but there basically any topic that you could think of has a subreddit already. So Reddit, sorry, there's a train. Reddit is an amazing tool potentially for almost any industry or any scope that you might be writing about. And in general, all these other things are true where it's a huge audience. Reddit is massive. They do tend to be pretty critical. So you need to understand the community because it is a community. That's another point on here. People tend to prefer staying on the platform. They're really averse to spam. So you need to learn almost like how to participate effectively on Reddit if you're going to participate there. But it does allow you to get really specific because again, there's basically a subreddit for everything. Oh, I did not share the results, but there you go. You can see them now as I move to question 18. So let's move on. We're almost done. There's maybe 8 or so more questions, but we'll go through them quickly. So SEO, we're on to chapter 4, I believe. Question 18, what 2 aspects in particular of the code's framework, which is cost, ownership, dependability, effort, and scalability, explain why SEO in particular as a or as a channel can be so impactful or effective? And I won't read these out, but it's, you know, any 2 combinations of, again, cost, ownership, dependability, effort, and scalability, which 2 are in particular the best for SEO? Why is it so effective? All right, get your votes in. All right, so actually most people got this one wrong. As you can see, most people said ownership and scalability. It is E, dependability and scalability. So something I want to call out here and why it's not some of these other ones. So ownership, you don't own Google, right? It's an algorithm. Ownership is better than some social platforms because as I've talked about before, Google's purpose is to send people to your content versus having the content exist on Twitter, for example, but you still don't own it. There's still a layer that you cannot control. There's still an algorithm that you don't fully understand. So ownership is somewhere in the gray zone for SEO. But what is really, really positive for SEO is the sense of dependability and scalability. Meaning, again, dependability is the sense, do you know how much traffic you're going to get from this platform today and 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now, etc. That is, if you do SEO properly, you build up this bedrock that is dependable over time. And then what's incredible about this Bedrock relative to some of the other Bedrock channels is just the pure scalability of this platform. So Google is the biggest search engine in the world. And if you remember, there's this image, I don't know if I have it here, I do not, but of just like the pure size of Google, even relative to other giants like Facebook or Twitter. It's incredible. And the number of searches every year is in the trillions. So really, if you can build up your search engine optimization so that you're bringing in a lot of organic traffic, it's this incredible, dependable foundation that can be scaled up nearly infinitely. So it is dependability and scalability. All right, question number 19 is, which is not one of the 3 keys to the Google algorithm that you should care about? And so this relates to, if you remember, there are so many ranking factors out there, and they all really kind of parse down into 3 key things. Which one of these is not one of those key things? Is it relevancy, length, credibility, or usability? And I talked about this earlier in the call, so if you were listening, you should hopefully get this one right, which looks like most people are getting right here. All right, so it is length, which again, which is not one of the 3 keys. So a lot of people think that length is a direct input into the Google algorithm. To my understanding, it is not. Length can matter because you want to fulfill the user's search intent and make sure that they're getting what they're looking for. But as I've shown you guys in the past, if, for example, I search for what is 27 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit? I'm Canadian, so I search that kind of stuff all the time. I just get a number, right? I don't get some long form article that explains exactly how to convert it. Google knows that in certain cases, you actually do want just a response. You want the shortest form of the most thorough response that exists, right? And in that case, it's just a number. Sometimes it's in the form of a super long form article. In this case, the idea here is that across the things that you should care about, you should not be optimizing for length. You should be optimizing for servicing an individual's query. But what you definitely do need to worry about are these 3 things, which is credibility, relevancy, and usability. So credibility is how high quality is your domain. Does Google view you as credible? That impacts things like your domain authority. So get your domain authority to double digits. Relevancy, that's relevancy to the query. So are you helping Google identify that your article actually services particular queries by doing the right keyword research and making sure you're selecting aligned keywords, and aligned keywords in particular with intent, if you remember. And then usability, is it usable for the searcher? Some things that you can do very quickly are just make sure that your site loads pretty quickly, that it's mobile optimized, things like that. All right, question 20 is live, and it is, what is not a type of search intent? So remember, relevancy is one of the 3 keys. One part of relevancy is making sure that you're addressing the right type of search intent. Which one is not a type of search intent? Is it A, instructional, B, navigational, C, transactional, D, informational, E, commercial, or F, ambiguous? All right, get your votes in. I'm going to close out this poll in a couple seconds. Okay, so most people got this wrong, but I can understand why, and let me explain the idea behind this question. So the answer is instructional. So this was, I guess one person picked up on this. There is informational as a type of search intent. Instructional would be a subset of that. So for example, informational people are looking to, as you can see here, they want to know something. So sometimes when they are looking to know something, they're looking for an instructional response, but sometimes it's a long form opinion piece. There's different types of informational content. Sometimes it's definition, but the idea here is that there is a broader subset of intent, which is informational. There is no intent specifically, at least identified by Google, that is instructional. That would be a subset of informational. If you remember, there's different types of intent, including navigational, transactional, and commercial queries. You need to make sure that the particular type of query that you're addressing is matched to what you're providing. So if you're writing long form content, you always want to target informational queries. And a lot of people guessed ambiguous here, and I can understand why. So something to keep in mind is that I guess ambiguous here would actually somewhat be correct, because in general, when a particular individual is searching for something, they don't have an ambiguous intent. They always have a specific type of intent. But with a keyword overall, there can be different cohorts of people who are looking for different things, and therefore a keyword can have ambiguous intent, but a particular person in their mindset as they're searching cannot have ambiguous intent. So if you answered ambiguous, you're kind of right here. This one was a little bit of a trick in the fact that instructional sounds a little bit like informational, but you get the point here. All right, question 21. All right, why are niche keywords often better than broad keywords? Is it A, because there is less competition, B, because it's easier to get intent right, C, because ranking click-through rate diminishes exponentially, or is it the combination of A and B, or is it all of the above? Looks like people are a little bit split on this one. All right, so I'm gonna end the poll. So the answer in this case is all of the above. Oh, did I not include, sorry, did not include, this is supposed to be highlighted all of the above, but the idea here is that this is directly from the SEO lecture. You want to be reasonable with your targets, and by reasonable, you want to select most of the time, unless you've got a huge domain authority, select niche keywords. Even if you have a high domain authority, it's better to select niche keywords in some instances because it's easier to get the intent right. So the higher the number or the higher search volume there is, the more likely that a query is ambiguous. So remember, a particular searcher doesn't have ambiguous query, but a query overall can be ambiguous. So it's easier to get the intent right. It's less likely that it's ambiguous. It's also less competition, both in terms of the number of the results on the page or trying to rank for that page, but also the strength, right? So what's the DA of the particular results that are trying to rank there? And then this idea of the ranking click-through rate does diminish exponentially. So anything at rank 1 gets way, way more clicks than rank 2 versus rank 3. And then after that, it really drops off a cliff. So it's much more valuable for you to be ranking the first for a bunch of niche queries than it is to be ranking even 10th for a bunch of broad queries. Okay, question 22. Almost done here, 4 more. What is not true about domain authority? So it's domain authority ... Either A represents the age of a site, B is based upon the number of backlinks to a site, C grows logarithmically, or D can determine your likelihood of ranking an article. All right, looks like most people got this one right as well. It is A represents the age of a site, which is, again, this is what is not true. So what is true is that A, it is based on the number of backlinks and referring domains to your particular domain. It does grow logarithmically, which means that it's easier to go from 0 to 10 than it is to go from 80 to 90. And then finally, it also does have an impact on your likelihood of ranking a particular article, because domain authority, within domain authority, there is also page authority, which is the number of backlinks and referring domains to that particular page, which very directly impacts, both in terms of page authority and domain authority, how likely that particular article is to rank for a particular keyword. Of course, it's one of the inputs in the algorithm, but it is certainly one of the inputs. Now, what is not true is that domain authority is not related to the age of your site. Of course, if you've been around for longer, you have more opportunity to have built up links to your domain. So often a site, just apples to apples, if a site has been around for longer, it likely has a higher domain authority, but that obviously is not true across the board. There are many sites that are very new within the last year that have just created immense value, been shared a bunch, and therefore built up a bunch of links that have a much higher domain authority than a site that's just been floating around for years that hasn't really been building up any authority. So, oops, dropped my headphones there. But yes, the answer here is it does not necessarily represent the age of a site. All right, question 23 is when building links, you want to focus on ... A, any links that you can get, B, no follow links, C, follow links, or D, none of the above. Looks like around half of people voted. Everyone's gotten it right so far. So this one's pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to end this one early. It is follow links. So quick reminder that not all links are equal. You want to make sure that any links that you're targeting, especially if you're going and actually trying to do a concerted effort to build links, are follow links. Now remember, links in general by default are follow links, but certain sites, especially sites that function off of user-generated content, whether it's Medium or Dribbble or the comments that people use with Disqus, all of those are user-generated content that the actual site can't necessarily verify or check everything that is being added through there, and for that reason, they make the decision to make any links within that no follow links. So that's really, really important that if you are going, especially if you're doing a concerted effort, you want only follow links. You don't want no follow links, and you do want to check that. You want to make sure that you're not investing your time in something that doesn't actually help you with your domain authority. All right, final chapter is monetization. There's just 2 questions here to close things out. So question 24 is, if you are setting up any sort of newsletter sponsorships, using blank is best for advertisers, but using blank is easiest if you are a new newsletter. So best for the newsletter effectively. So it's some combination of cost per click, cost per open, and cost per send overall. So which one is easiest for the advertiser, or best for the advertiser, I should say, and then which one is actually easiest for newsletters, in particular if you're new and you're not necessarily at scale. Okay, most people got this one right as well. It is D, cost per click and cost per send. You remember there is kind of like this spectrum where for an advertiser, the thing that they want is they actually want someone on their site looking at whatever their offer is. The closest thing to that is a click, right? Because you're guaranteeing that traffic is actually going to their site. The problem with clicks is that it's very, very hard to price clicks, especially because, again, a click for a SaaS enterprise tool or enterprise SaaS tool is worth way more than a click to like a t-shirt brand, right? And so for that reason, it can be hard to price clicks effectively. And so what some people or what many larger newsletters do is they do cost per open, which is which is hard to do at small scale because you may not know how many opens you're going to get, but also from a logistical perspective, if you're doing cost per open, your billing is way different, right? Because it's based on the number of opens. So you have to sign some sort of contract. Then once you send out your newsletter, you have to check the number of opens, and you have to bill them based on that number of opens. So from the perspective of a newsletter, especially if you're just starting out and you only have 1,000 subscribers, let's say, you just do cost per send. You just say, I'm charging $50. It's not as good for this the advertiser because there's less of a guarantee there of the value that they're going to get. Because if you have 1,000 subscribers, what if none of them open? What if none of them click? Well, then that's worthless to them. So there's a balance here, but in general, if you're just starting out, people tend to do cost per send, despite cost per click being the best kind of aligned value for the advertiser. Okay, oops. And question 25 is the final one. I don't know if you guys just saw the answer or not, but I don't think so. Maybe. It is, what is typically the biggest driver of price point for information products? Is it perceived value, market saturation, size of your following, or the quality of your product? Based on the answers so far, I think you guys saw the answer based on me going to the next slide accidentally. So I will end the poll since I don't know if you guys actually got the answer or if you saw it, but it is perceived value. And this is a concept that I wanted to close out on because I think it's really important that you can put out great quality work, you can have a huge following, you can do a lot of things that are good. But remember that you are operating within a sphere that already exists, right? And there are many predefined notions about what exists, how much it should cost. And so keep that in mind. I see people often try to change people's opinions on things. And by this, I mean, you know, if you think back to even 5 years ago, it was really, really rare for people to spend money on iPhone apps. There was just a certain perceived value around them for whatever reason, no matter how valuable they actually were. People were like, I don't want to spend more than 99 cents on an iPhone app. And that took years to actually slowly change. And you don't want to be the person fighting that uphill battle. You want to make sure that you're using the constraints of what people actually view to your advantage. So I gave an example last week about how Seth Godin uses this concept of an MBA and how much the perceived value of that is to create an alt MBA, which he now charges, you know, I think it's like $4,500 for. The flip side of that coin is if you're, for example, creating an ebook like myself, there are constraints. You're never going to sell an ebook for $5,000. That's just a fact. Could you maybe sell a course for $5,000? Maybe, right? And so the point here is that with everything that you're creating, do not try to fight battles that you cannot win, right? Even some of these things, they may shift over time. Maybe in 10 years, an ebook you could sell for thousands of dollars, but today you can't. And you don't want to be the person trying to change that. And so in general, try to remember that with whatever you're creating, you are fitting within, again, a world that already exists, and make sure that you're creating stuff that you're doing so in a way that it's to your advantage and you're leveraging these constraints in a positive way. And make sure that with whatever you're doing, if you can get closer to what a reader can quantify as value, so if it, for example, can get them a job, if it can get them a promotion, if it can, you know, teach them a quantifiable skill that saves them time, all of that stuff is easier for them to perceive and therefore easier for you to make a sale or to put a price tag on. So if you are trying to monetize something, remember there's all these other things that exist, but really there's always going to be a perceived value on what you're creating, regardless of how good it is, how much time you've invested, how big your following is, and things like that. So yes, that is it for the, I guess, this section. I have one quick slide of reminders, and then I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and then we'll be done here. The quick reminders are from chapter 6 of the extras in the book, and it's just like a few super quick reminders, which is that hopefully, if you guys are interested, you're going to embark and go start writing. And, you know, as I've mentioned many times throughout this, these live sessions, the content game is a long game. Well, if you start going along that journey, there are a couple things that you can run into, and I call them, like, in the book at least, certain mistakes that you can run into, or certain problems. And they're good problems to have because they mean that you're successful. But I'm just going to quickly call some of these out. So the mistakes. One is this concept that I keep drilling in because it's so important. if you write it, they will not necessarily come. You need to distribute. Distribution needs to be a core part of what you do. If you don't incorporate distribution, it'll be so much harder for you to grow. Now, another mistake that you can make is getting too micro. But what I mean by this is focusing on the nitty gritty of everything, right? So checking your Google Analytics every day, making sure that you're sending your newsletter at the exact right time, on the exact right day, making sure that, you can never skip a week, things like that. Don't focus on being too perfect, getting too micro, focusing on things that don't move the needle. We talked about SMART goals in one of the sessions. Focus on things that move the needle. Focus on doing what you should be focused on, which is providing value to your readers. And how you get there is something that you can decide and something that can fluctuate over time. So don't get too micro, don't get too caught up in the weeds, and make sure you default to action. What I mean by this is, again, you can get a little lost in things that you do. So for example, if you wanted to create a new podcast series, what some people do is they say, okay, if I'm going to create this new project, I'm going to outline exactly what this project is going to look like. I'm going to think of all the guests that I want on it. I'm going to write down all the questions. I'm going to do all of these things. I'm going to basically lay out the entire project. And the reason I say you shouldn't do that and instead default to getting started, taking action, is because A, that's really daunting if you have to go and map out exactly what's going to happen. B, it's not very motivating to have to do all that before you actually get any sort of reward, right? And so if you actually do micro actions, you get more of a habit loop going there. But also, it's most of the time, if people like try to do all of those things at once, they don't realize that many things change, right? And so you may go interview your first podcast guest and then realize, wow, that really didn't go well and those weren't the right questions, or maybe this is not the type of person I'm trying to interview. And then all that work goes to zero, right? It's useless. And so default to action, make sure that you're constantly moving forward and not necessarily, grandstanding these plans, and just have the kind of mentality of defaulting to action. How do I get started? Because this may change over time and I'm going to learn over time, but I'm just going to focus on moving in the right direction. And then a quick good problems to have, when I call them, which means, again, these happen when you're successful, in the sense that people are listening to you, you have people excited about what you do, you have people asking about what you do, and it's this concept of losing your time, your edge, or your why. And I'll quickly go through them. Your time, all this means is that if you're successful, you're going to get a lot more emails, a lot more requests, a lot more people asking you to go on podcasts or whatever it is. Make sure you're mindful with your time. Don't be afraid to charge for it. In the book, I give an example of what I've started to say to certain people who, will ask me to try out an app or, jump on a quick call, things like that. But make sure that, your time is your most valuable resource. Make sure that as you scale, your influence potentially, or your traffic, or whatever you're scaling, that you're mindful of your time and you protect it. The second is losing your edge, And what I mean by this is, most of the time, we talked about differentiators a lot in this book. And one of the key aspects of having a differentiator is that you do something differently than other people do it, right? And sometimes it's anything from being super funny to being super contrarian, or to being super deeply researched. We talked about many of these things, but sometimes those things, you lose them over time because you happen to start appealing to a broader audience. So for example, if you're more contrarian and the things that you wrote about at the beginning were contrarian and, exactly what you were thinking, and you had no shame in sharing them, people loved that. They're like, wow, this is so honest, it's so real. But as you got bigger, you're like, wow, I don't know how I feel about sharing this opinion anymore. Or for example, even I've seen with my own content, I'm like, wow, I don't know if I want to publish this particular article because I don't know what people will think. You start to care more as you build up an audience. Make sure, as much as you can, you're not losing your edge. The reason that made you successful, you're not losing that. And that at the end of the day, regardless of how big your audience is, you're still just writing for your 100 true fans, your core audience, right? You may appeal to more people than that, but make sure that you're consistently writing to your core fans. And I like to give the analogy of, if you were in a room with your 5 best friends, you would be completely comfortable talking about certain things. And that's kind of how it feels when you're starting a publication. And then once you get bigger, are you comfortable talking about those same things in front of an audience like a conference of 1,000? Probably not. But maybe there are certain things that you still can carry over between that shift that allows you to still have your edge and allows you to keep the reason that people were interested in your stuff in the first place. So try not to lose this concept of your edge, and then finally don't lose your why. And all I mean by this is, you know, some of you are here to launch some sort of almost like corporate blog or something adjacent to your company, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in some cases, like we talked about, Andrew, people are looking to start some sort of personal brand, or they're really excited to share their thoughts. When I started my blog, it was because I had a certain opinions that I wanted to share. And all I'm trying to say here is that whatever you're starting this for can get lost pretty easily, especially if you start to get attention, you start to consider monetization, for example. So just don't lose the reason that you started it. Don't kind of pivot your project into something that you no longer love doing, that you no longer want to do, but you just do because it makes money. Don't forget why you started the thing in the first place. So again, these are good problems to have in the sense that they come once there tends to be more people paying attention, once you happen to have invested a lot of time into it. But just keep in mind that all of this kind of boils down to this concept that as long as you know where you want to go, you can figure out your own way there, and that may change over time. But knowing where you want to get is a super powerful force, even if you don't know exactly how you'll get there. So it's going to be a journey if you guys end up actually trying to build up your, you know, quote unquote digital home or content engine over time. So yeah, I wish you guys the best of luck. If you are, keep these things in mind. Don't get too micro. Make sure you invest in distribution, and just, you know, keep focusing on taking action versus overanalyzing things. And I think that's it from me, at least in terms of this, those quick things that I wanted to note. I know we're already pretty far into this. I think it's 9:30. But if there's any additional questions, I'm around now if you guys have them. If not, then we can call it a day. But if anyone wants to go off mute or write in the chat your questions, happy to answer them.
I have one question.
Sure.
It's mostly regarding Twitter, but I think it can be applied to all social media platforms.
Yeah.
I feel like on Twitter, like among tech Twitter, so to speak, there's like most people tweeting the same way. It's very, I don't know if you, I mean, I guess most of you know Naval Ravikant. So most people have this style of tweeting quite, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like lesson-like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I feel like if most people use it, it works, but I don't really like that style. So do you think it's worth like drifting away from this established type of tweeting, or should I just copy what works and go with the flow?
Yeah, so I think that style of tweeting works for a certain type of person. And I just think those people happen to be so big on Twitter that we all see them and we're like, oh, that's the only way to be successful on Twitter. I can call out a couple accounts. Let me actually pull them up of people that I follow that are not that type of Twitter at all. One of them is a guy named Visa Cam. I don't know if you guys have followed him. I love his Twitter. It's so just like, you can tell it's just like exactly what he's thinking. It's almost like his train of thought consistently, but it's not packaged. And you can tell that people like Naval, they go and they think about something for a long time and then they package it, right? Visa's is more so just like, this is my train of thought. Let me pull up his handle so that I can send it to you guys. Another person that I love in terms of her Twitter is a girl named Andrea. I know her originally from Women Make, and her similarly is just like, you can tell that she's not filtering anything. It's just things that she's interested in. It's just things that she's really interested. She cooks, so she shares things that she cooks. She shares her travels, things like that. But she does it in a really, really authentic way. And so the point here is that both of these individuals have not built up followings maybe to the size of someone like Naval, but they've built up followings, and they've built up really engaged followings because people adhere to their personality, right? And so I think there's many ways to grow a Twitter following. One thing that I would say is however you grow it, you should be consistent with that over time, right? Because people follow accounts and then they get to know, oh, I follow this account because they like, I think they're hilarious, or like for example, like VC Brags, right? Like that was, people follow that because it's hilarious, right? They don't even know who's running it, but it's hilarious. But other times people follow individuals because they're, again, really authentic. Other times it's because they just have like these really kind of crisp insights. And whatever you do, you need to identify what that is. Why would someone follow me? Because that's really the question that you need to ask. There are millions, if not billions, I'm not sure how many people are on Twitter these days, but there is a lot of people that you can follow on Twitter, right? And you need to ask the question, like, why would someone follow me, right? Like, of all the people that they could see in their timeline, why would they want to see me there? There's many reasons that can be that answer, right? But you need to identify what that is, and then you need to stay consistent with that over time, where it doesn't necessarily only need to be about one topic. So for example, Visa, he tweets about literally everything, but there's something about the way he tweets. It's almost like you're a friendship, right? You're like listening, you're like in his vicinity, right? And you can just tell he's like this really like interesting, wise person. And it's just like, I want to be around that, right? So I want him in my feed, right? But again, there's many different reasons why you want someone in your feed, but you have to ask yourself that question and be honest with yourself. Like, would I want to even follow myself? Yes or no? And if I would, then like, what is that reason? Like, why would I want to follow someone like me, and be honest with that? It's the same thing with like writing content or, creating products. Like, of the, millions of books out there on personal development, if I'm going to write a book on personal development, I better figure out like why people should read mine versus like Tim Ferriss's or Shane Parrish's, or you know what I mean, right? So it's the same thing on Twitter. Everything exists on Twitter already, or most things to some degree, but like, how can you differentiate in a way that people actually want to engage with you? And how whatever you figure out there probably will map out to your content as well off of Twitter.
Yeah, this makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a struggle that most people have, like to find what will make you different. And maybe just me, but I feel like I know what makes me different, but I have a hard time translating it to like video or to writing. Maybe it's because English is not my native language. I don't know, but it's the same in French. So I feel like there's like a gap between what you are and then expressing it like to thousands, hundreds of people. Whereas when I'm with my friends or with people I know, I feel like my personality, I mean, you can feel it. But then when I'm on Twitter, it's like, what should I write? People are writing like this, what should I do, etc. And then get like, then at the end of the day, my content, I feel, is just like a copy of what everyone does. And it's like, so yeah.
Yeah, no, and I totally understand that. And that's why I would encourage you to like, as much as you can, I get that it's like you're kind of bombarded with Naval like tweets all the time. Just like ignore that and tweet the way you want to tweet, right? And you can also, Twitter is like, even though you don't have access to their algorithm in the sense that you don't know how they're showcasing stuff and all that, you can get a lot of data back, right? Where you start to tweet and you start to see what people engage with you, right? And then you start to like, that's almost like, there are certain things that I've developed over time in the way I tweet. Like I used to only tweet about like my articles or remote work or like very specific things. And now I'll tweet about like, I just bought plants or whatever, and I'm trying to keep them alive, or like I'll make jokes and stuff. But I only start doing that as I like kind of, as you do with like friendships, figure out like, oh, what do people kind of like about me, or what do people respond well to, or whatever, right? So you can use Twitter to learn as well, right? It's where you tweet about things and you see, whoa, like I totally did not expect that tweet to go viral, but it did. What can I learn from this, right?
Yeah, well, thanks for the answer.
Sure. And one final thing I'll add there. So I talk about building in the open a lot. And to give you an example of like how you can learn from Twitter, my very first project was this project called Nomad Hub, which is like not a good project at all. But I tweeted about it and I had no following. At the time I had like 60 followers from high school that were like, probably only 2 were still on the platform. And I tweeted about it, but I tagged Product Hunt and they ended up sharing it. But this is the interesting part. It got a bunch of likes, retweets, all this stuff, even though I had no following. And what I realized is I read through the comments and the tweet was something along the lines of like, just taught myself, or like spent the last X months learning to code. Here's my first project, Nomad Hub, blah, blah, blah. And if I read through the comments, I saw no one gave a crap about Nomad Hub. Like no one was like, oh, this is such a great project. Like I went to the site and like signed up, none of that. It was all people who were like, oh my God, like I really want to learn to code, or like, can you tell me more about this? And I was like, whoa, there's a lot of people who really care about learning to code, and like how they want to know how I did this. And then in particular, they wanted to know like in this like open way, like how they could do the same. And then I was like, oh, okay, there's something there. And then from then on, I was like, I'm going to start sharing my journey more. And that's now I've created like an open page, but that was the seed. Like I can think back to seeing that tweet and I was like, literally no one cares about this project, but they care about the story behind the project and like, you know, how they can do something similar. And then from there on, I started, you know, I did like a live stream at one point. I did all this stuff in the open. And so you can learn based on certain things that happen to get attention on Twitter or whatever platforms that you're using and be like, what's the common thread here of like why people are engaging with this? It might not always be what you think at face value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see.
Cool. Any other questions?
Can I add to or not add to something,
Sure,
but can I
of course.
ask a question that's like a spin-off of Monique's? Because I so appreciate just like the sentiment that you're stuck between this place where you're like, well, like this is my authentic self, and then like this is what I'm seeing, and like how do I meet in the middle? And my question is, apart from just appreciating that, is like what happens, right, when you have this part of you that's like authentic, you have like the content that like you publish, or like if it's a tweet, you're like, I'm so proud of this tweet, this is great. And then like nothing happens and it's crickets. And then you post something and you're like, this isn't really who I'm trying to be, but it's one of those tweets that like, for like a lot of my Twitter is just, it's like comedies, like writers, like people trying to get a quick laugh. And that's the stuff that does really well. So it's like, how do you kind of balance like leaning into the stuff that does really well versus like, cause it's, for me, it's like, it's either end. It's like either like, it's great or it like falls flat. And anytime that I try to share something a little bit more serious or maybe like business focused, everyone's like, Sarah, stop it. It's off brand. And I'm like, that's offensive because I don't even know what my brand is at this point, if that's what you're telling me. So I don't know if, does that question kind of make sense? Because you want to lean into one, but then.
Yeah, it definitely resonates. And I don't know if I have a great answer here because it's something that I've also been figuring out because, for example, yeah, I think, so Chris commented just now, like keeping authentic. So across all the things that you can write about, I definitely think, do not try to like craft a certain personality online. Like again, where you're like I'm not Naval, I don't think like Naval, so I'm not going to tweet like Naval, right? But within topics, right? Things that like you mentioned, like there are certain things that like maybe like politics that maybe you want to talk about or, you know, specific things that aren't related to what people know you for. I'm not saying that you want to talk about these things, but for example, you want to talk about politics or you want to talk about media or you want to talk about, you know, your relationship or all these things. And it's like not really what people know you for. Well, that is something that you need to decide like how far you want to go, because it is true that like people do start to get to know you for certain things. And the further that you venture out of those things, the less that they're likely to want to engage, right? Because they're following you for a specific reason. So for example, I think it's I wrote a book about it. So I've now kind of like nailed, what's the saying? Like nailed myself in the coffin, or like, basically I never thought I would be known for writing. I used to hate writing in high school. I still to this day would much rather spend my day in a spreadsheet than in a Google Doc. But I've learned to like accept the fact that I actually know a lot about this space, that I can educate other people potentially. And so I've kind of leaned into it, and that was a choice. For a long time, I was like, man, like I really don't want to be known as a writer because I don't think I'm a writer. And so you kind of just have to make that decision for yourself. Like, how much am I going to lean into this or not? How much do I want this to be how people view me or not? Because you really can craft the narrative. Like I could have not written this book and written a book about something else, and then people would have known me for that thing, right? And so again, it's not a great answer, but you have to make that decision. I think across whatever you do, you be authentic, where you're not trying to be someone else or, you know, trying to talk about topics that you don't care about. But then there always is this like much wider scope of things that you can talk about and that you might want to talk about that people might not want to or might not be as interested to hear from you. And so another thing to keep in mind is that there are different outlets, right? So for example, Twitter tends to be more of like a tech, business, personal development, like that group is on there. There's also a lot of politics and other stuff, but like I recognize that. And so even though I do sometimes like, you know, tweet about like how do I keep my plants alive and stuff, like most of the time I'm sticking to, for the people who know me for generally X, Y, and Z, like would this fit on this platform? But then, you know, in, for example, Telegram groups with my friends from Bali, I'll talk about other things, or with my boyfriend, I'll talk about other things. So you have different outlets where you can, obviously talk about different things or share different things, or even on your blog, you can write about different things. But I would keep in mind that, there is kind of like a view that people start to develop over time of you and your online personality. And it's really your choice on how much you want to diversify that or really like lean into certain things or not.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
No problem. Any other?
Steph, on the note of writing, just want to ask you, in terms of writing consistently, do you think it's important to write with a certain structure in terms of a template? Like, if you look at most Substack newsletters, they have like a steady, there's a consistent structure, right? So there's like an intro, there's like 3 things, or, et cetera, et cetera. Like each person's.
Oh, I think we lost you for a second. I think I got your question now. He's yellow for you guys too, right? As in the screen. Okay. Well, I'm going to wait a second to see if he comes back so that I can answer his question. Ritesh, you're cutting out, but I don't know if you can hear us.
Hey, did I?
Yeah, lost you for a second, but I think I caught most of that question. You were just basically asking about how important it is to have like a structure to your content. My answer to that is I think the structure for the content is actually more so for the writer and less so for the reader, in the sense that if someone gets to your article again, they don't know, unless they've been following you for a long time, they don't know that your last 5 articles were structured like so, right? They just know whatever they're reading at that given time. And so for that reason, the structure of something is, if you're repeating a structure in terms of what I mean, then that's really more so for you as a writer, if you need that, right? Where it can help you write more quickly. It can help you kind of like stick to the same type of narrative. It's easier for you to do if it's the same structure over time. Now for the reader, they don't know any better in terms of like, oh, you happened to do the structure in the past. Obviously it's good to have a good, storyline or structure of any article, but that changes all the time, right? Like the structure that I write is completely different than the structure that you write versus the next person. And so when you see people in Substack that always have the same structure, I think that's actually more so for the writer and less so for the reader. Because I think actually if you were to start from a blank slate, the structure for almost any article would be unique in terms of you were actually just trying to purely facilitate what's best for the reader. It's actually helping kind of like add in constraints for yourself as a writer to say like, I could go in 8 billion directions and I just know this direction is pretty good. And therefore I'm going to use this constraint. So that's easier for me to write. So again, the constraint of a specific outline that you use over and over is more for you as a writer, less for the reader.
That was really useful. Thank you so much. Because I have a habit of writing ad hoc, and I was like wondering if I'm doing this wrong, because like everyone else has like a steady structure, whereas I just start somehow and I end somewhere else.
Well, yeah, and it also depends on the type of content. So none of my articles have a structure either. But for example, if you're writing, like I know some people will like do a teardown of a product, for example, right? And like, how does this make money? How has it grown? Like who's running the product? Things like that. In which case it's a lot easier again for the writer to say, okay, look, these are just all the things that people care about. I'm just going to make sure to address all of them in this structure. But for many things, especially if they're less defined, then you don't necessarily need to come in with a specific type of structure. I think if anything, it can be limiting. But again, the way you can think of structure for an article, especially if it's predefined going in, is it's a constraint. So that can be good or bad. It can be good in that it removes the number of variables that you need to consider, right? It's very straightforward for you to go and just facilitate that structure. But it can be limiting in that, oh, what if there's actually a really interesting story that I could incorporate here? Or whatever actually makes sense to exclude this section? Well, the structure is limiting in that it's defining exactly how you're going to address or communicate a particular topic, right? So again, there's pros and cons, but most of the time the structure comes into play. A predefined structure comes into play in helping a writer add in constraints so it's actually easier for them to facilitate whatever they're doing, especially again if they do something repetitive, like they always do product teardowns or industry analyses or things like that.
Awesome. So, thank you so much.
Sure. Any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, just it's me again.
Sure.
But before we go, since now we are like mostly now 8 people, I think. I just wanted maybe to have some feedback on my my blog, my homepage. I just did it on WordPress. I don't use Ghost, sorry.
No,
But maybe
WordPress is great.
no, just kidding. Just maybe if you can just tell me what you think, because I'm not a designer and my design choices are often very bad. So maybe if I can show you and share my screen. Okay, I'm sharing the.
I need to enable it. Let me
Yeah.
see. Where is that again? I can never remember. No. Does anyone remember where to do that in Zoom? I can never.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how to use Zoom after 6 months, so.
I know it's just normally sometimes it's in like a strange section of Zoom.
Oh, maybe I can just send.
Oh, here I did. I think it works now. Sure. I think if you try now.
Yeah. Okay. So there it is. You should be able to see it now.
Yep.
Oh, there it is.
Great. So can you let me know what specifically you're looking for feedback on? Like, is it?
Oh, it's mostly the design, but if you have any more, any more feedback to add, I'd be glad to hear it. But it's more about the design and how you like the fonts and that kind of stuff, and the colors. And
so something to keep in mind here is that, well, I'm not a designer by trade, but I would also say that if you read a lot of the big blogs online, like design is important, but it's definitely not necessarily essential. So if you go to like Derek Sivers' blog, for example, it is like plain text, white. It is, any designer would say that it's horrible looking, at least, right? But your job, especially if you're writing content online, is just to get like a point across, right? In which case, like very kind of like thorough or nice design can be distracting. In which I'm not saying that's the case for you, but that's just something to keep in mind where, if you're, for example, designing a direct conversion landing page, that's when you want to start using different visual elements, really understand UX, UI. But for something like a blog, you just want to make sure something is readable. That is the most important thing. That just purely, can someone read this easily? Because if they can read it easily, that means they can get the information from you, right? What you're trying to send information from one person to another. That's all you're trying to do with content. And so in this case, I think your font is readable. It's sizable, which is important. You want to make sure that if you're using mobile, it's still big enough. That's something that I actually haven't fixed on my own site, but that's important. You want to make sure that anything that's important that you want someone to know as they come to your site is above the fold, which I basically see here. You can see like your name, what you do, what your goals are. You're trying to achieve financial freedom. You can see your nav bar. It's pretty straightforward. If there's anything that you specifically want people to see, in the sense that like this is really important. So for example, of the things up there in your nav bar, if you really wanted someone to look at your personal experiments, you'd want to bold that. Or basically the one piece of feedback that I can see so far is that everything has the same hierarchy, in the sense that like if I get to your site, I may read this, but I'm just as likely to read one thing versus another, or click to one thing versus another. If there's anything in particular that you want to nudge someone towards, right, as you'd want to show them, one of the things I talk about in the book is how you want to basically increase the likelihood that people encounter your best stuff, right? So whatever your best stuff is, whether it's your articles, whether it's your Twitter, whatever you want people to go to, right now there's no hierarchy, there's no visual indication that someone should engage with something versus another, right? But overall, I think your landing page is fine. I like the personal touch. I like that you have your face there. I like that you can see read my latest articles above the fold as well. So another mistake that people make with product is that sometimes it looks like the page ends. I know that sounds crazy when you're designing the page, but if for example, you couldn't see read my latest articles there, people might actually think the page, that's, you know, the full length of the page. So I like that you're showing people that they can continue scrolling. Can you scroll down further actually, just to see if you...
Yeah, I mean, I only have 2 articles so far, but I'm still working on writing more.
Yeah, that's completely fine. No, I just wanted to see here. Yeah, this looks fine. I like that you have tags. I would probably make the, if possible, make the text of the title, again, more strong or bigger because it blends in with the rest of the text here. I would probably make the CTA more prominent in the sense that right now it blends into the background more. So read more is the same color as the background. I know it's got the blue border, but that if you want people to click through. But yeah, I mean, this is completely fine. And like I said, your goal, especially as like a writer, is not to have the most beautiful site ever. If anything, really, really beautiful sites can be distracting, especially for content, but this looks fine. I called out a couple things that I think you can improve, but all of that was pretty minor in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, well, thank you for the feedback.
Sure.
It's appreciated.
Yeah, no problem. All right, well, anyone else, questions, thoughts? Anyone else want me to look at their stuff? If not, all right, well, I'm gonna call that a session then. So thank you so much, as always. This is the last session. So thank you for those who attended multiple sessions, but regardless, thank you for buying the book. Really appreciated all of your time, your engagement. Hope you had fun, hope you learned something. You can always reach me, either DM me on Twitter or email me at hello@stephsmith.io. Some people have asked, do you have plans for kind of like future iterations of this project? Not at the moment. So hopefully you got what you could out of this product so far. But like I said, you can always reach me. Recordings will all be online. And yeah, you can always engage in the Telegram community as well. So thanks so much, everyone, and hope to see all of you sometime soon. Bye.
Thank you so much. You've been
Bye.
really, really, really helpful.
Thanks, Ritesh. Bye, everyone.